we're live now. Assalamu alaikum, sasrikal, namaste, and a hello to all of you who have come and joined us. Welcome to another edition of The Point. My name is Tariq Mehmood, and today we are going to discuss the question of COVID-19, Kashmir, and the creation of a new South Asia. Once again, for those of you who have just come to join us, my name is Tariq Mehmood. Welcome to The Point. We are talking to you from JKTV Live, and the subject for today is COVID-19, Kashmir, and the creation of a new South Asia. For those of you who don't know where Kashmir is, I work on the assumption you know where South Asia is. It's the little butterfly shape that sits at the top of India and Pakistan, below China. It's a much trampled upon butterfly. It is perhaps the most militarized zone on the planet. It is a land of great beauty, but at the moment of great suffering as well. And one of the points we will do, those of you who saw our publicity posters, you will see that we have a guest with us, Dr. Athar, and she will be joining us in a minute. And we will be discussing the question not just of Kashmir and its South Asian connections, but also the increasingly developing relationship between India and Israel and how that is impacting upon the lives of the people of Kashmir and in their struggles. Now, let me first welcome my guest. Welcome, Athar.
Thank you so much, Tariq.
And where are you joining us from?
I'm joining you from Greeley, Colorado.
Well, I'll share with you Athar's brief bio. She is a political anthropologist, a poet, a short fiction writer. She teaches at the University of Northern Colorado. She is the author of Resisting Disappearances, and we will be talking about her book later on in the program, Military Occupation and Women's Activism in Kashmir. She is the co-editor of Resisting Occupation in Kashmir. She is the founding editor of Kashmir Lit and is also the co-founder of Critical Kashmir Studies. She can be contacted, as you can see her Twitter handle over there. Once again, welcome, Athar. I hope I did justice to your bio. And for our viewers, I am coming to you from Manchester, and we met once in Beirut as well when you came to give a talk. That was quite an interesting venture that we meet in a place like Beirut with the never-ending wars, to our south behind us. And there we were able to discuss with our Lebanese and Palestinian friends the issue of Kashmir and how many things are connected. Hopefully, you will provide us a little bit more insight. Well, let me start off our discussion for today that many people around the world believe that Kashmir was shut down on 5th of August by the Indian government. Is that true? What happened then? And what was happening before?
Well, I think August 5 became a new milestone, August 5th, 2019. But it would be a mistake to think that it began on August 5th, 2019. What Kashmir is now, between India and Pakistan, might have also started in 1947, but Kashmir as a demand of a sovereign independent nation has started way before 1947. So it's not a problem of August 5th, 2019. So for that, we do have to slightly look into history and have a memory that is more than 3 weeks old. And we do have to think that Kashmiris for the last 72 years have been raising an alarm and talking to the world and trying myriads of ways. Sometimes, armed ways and sometimes unarmed ways, trying to tell the world that they have a genuine demand for sovereign, independent nation. And so it's not a problem that started August 5th.
And what happened on August 5th?
So August 5th, everyone, like people in the diaspora, people like me who are not in Kashmir, we woke up to this news. There was no news from Kashmir, but there was news about Kashmir. And the reason there was no news from Kashmir was because they were under a complete lockdown. There was a curfew, there was a communication lockdown, all internet had been switched off by the Indian government. They did not have access to phones, they did not have access to even landlines, they didn't have access to even the cable channels. Only some of the networks worked, which meant a complete communication lockdown. So people in Kashmir, now they tell us that they did not know what exactly was happening, but prior to that, they had been very alert of something that was about to come. And many people were speculating a war between India and Pakistan. Many people, Kashmiris, very canny politically, and they had already been speculating, and that they already were in know that something was happening with the autonomy, because ever since BJP came, the Article 370, which forged a relationship between of a quasi autonomy between Kashmir, Indian administered Kashmir, and India, that had always been under a direct assault. That is not to say that the Indian government prior to BJP coming to power was not assaulting Kashmir's autonomy and had not made it nominal. It was hollowed out already. So since 2014, there was an active case in the Supreme Court, a bill that was being heard and that was being deferred, and all eyes were on the judiciary, on India's Supreme Court, that this India, Kashmir's autonomy is going to go away. And then also the territorial sovereignty, which was protected under Article 35A, that was under direct assault, which meant that Kashmiris, just as any sovereign nation, they had the right to franchise, they had the right to property. Just like indigenous rights are protected everywhere, sovereignty of a country is protected everywhere. Similarly, it was with Kashmir under those articles. And speculating that this is going to go away because it has always been on BJP's agenda. And that's what happened on August 5th. But it happened in a very militaristic fashion. It was a re-annexation, if you will. 48,000 troops were flown into Kashmir. Most of non-Kashmiris, including the pilgrims who were in the region, the Hindu pilgrims who come for the Amarnath Yatra, which is this annual yatra. So they were in the region, they were emptied, they were taken out in sorties, and then the students who were non-Kashmiris, they were taken out. So people knew something was happening, but they didn't exactly know because the government was not telling them. On the contrary, what the government was doing was telling people that everything is okay. These are routine measures. But Kashmiris have been living this kind of emergency for the last 72 years. So they knew something was happening, but they exactly could not pinpoint. They knew that autonomy was under attack. They knew that 35A was under attack. They also knew there was a possibility of war, some sort of a war, conventional, unconventional, we don't know. So those speculations had been happening. And August 5th, this comes to a head. So we in the West, we in the diaspora across the globe, we wake up to the fact that autonomy is gone. We see over and over India's home minister announcing it in the parliament and projecting it as a matter of development of Kashmir, not as a matter of taking legal sovereignty of a state.
Of course, we saw these events from afar, and when we try to find out our friends, if their families were okay, if they were alive, say people were living in different countries, they would have to phone somebody in Delhi who might be lucky enough to get a phone call simply to see if the people on deathbeds were dead, if they could find any form of basic medicines. To how was your family affected during this period?
Well, I did not know how they were affected for a couple of months. I received a very short 1 minute and 56-second phone call from my sister. And it was a very hurried phone call which is really, it's very interesting. She told me that they are, in Kashmiri, we say mazasmaz. And mazasmaz means that we are enjoying. and she said that you be good, you be okay. And that was a phone call. And the way she said it, it really worried me. And the reason that we did not have a proper goodbye, and then later on, it kind of like unfolded that in time, in some weeks, the government set up these places in different police stations where there was a landline and people could call people outside. So she had done that kind of a thing. She'd gone to a place where she had a phone available, and then she'd called me. It was a very short phone call, and she did not know anything about her parents, even though they live 2 kilometers from where she lives. So she had not been able to get in touch with them. She did not know what had happened to the rest of the family, because this curfew, this lockdown was different from many other lockdowns. Not that this is unprecedented in the manner that everything was curtailed, but and for such a long time. But the fact is that this keeps
So
happening.
we approach the situation, I think, from a perspective of
I will cross. My love, I'm at the line of control, inching. Tonight, the moon is graying, the darkness perfecting itself, or so I hope. The breeze is weakening like the old tyrant's hand. I will.
I don't know what happened. I'm assuming we are live again. And perhaps we could start again. We don't know what happened. The internet seemed to have been disconnected, but let us go back and retrack ourselves. To those of you who were a little bit disconcerted about what happened, our lines couldn't have dropped simultaneously for all of us. But what we were discussing was the situation in Kashmir. Athar was talking to us from the United States and describing the horrors of daily life and on her family, of the lockdown and how it impacted. Perhaps as Athar, we can continue as discussed. Now, Kashmir had been in a lockdown, and I have been incidentally in the valley during the times of lockdown. And as I'm living in the lockdown in the period of COVID-19, the lockdown in Kashmir prior to the situation getting even worse, was nothing like what we hear. You may recall the days of the booth, if you remember. These were soldiers. I was in Srinagar at the time, and the curfew had taken effect. And if you put your face outside, the people whose house I was staying in, they said, under no circumstances put your face outside the window, for the booth will get you. And everyone, of course, knew booths don't have long hair and steel nails who happen to come only during curfew times. So, my point here being that the people under occupation have lived in the horrors of occupation for a very long time. So, now coming back onto the question for us, how has the current pandemic accentuated that situation? How has it affected people's lives within Kashmir?
Well, what we've seen in the past 1.5 months now, that India is deploying this pandemic as a weapon. So what it did in Kashmir, the moment the population was quarantined, within 1 week, it amended the domicile law. So this is like people are inside, they're quarantined, they can't come out. So this is a double lockdown.
What
One,
is the domicile law?
the domicile law, I'm going to go into that in a while. So first is that they're under a double lockdown. So they already have a partial internet ban, and there are whitelisted sites that they can access. The 2G internet means that only a select, it means a very slow internet, only text-based internet. So if there were people in Kashmir who have internet connection, they wouldn't be able to watch this video because they can't stream anything that is video-based, no content. So that in itself is curtailment of basic civil human rights. The doctors have been protesting because they want some information on COVID. They want what the directives are from the WHO and the global bodies. They're not able to access that. People are not able to access timely information. There is ban on social media. They're using VPNs. And what exactly happened after was that the police chief in Kashmir, he actually warned people that they're watching social media, so they should not be publishing anything. So most of the things were criminalized. Most of the things that they could say, and simultaneously what was happening from the government side, from the Delhi side, was that they amended the domicile law. Now the domicile law which was protected under the quasi-autonomy, which was taken away on August 5th, 2019, unilaterally. And then the second part of it, which was Article 35A, which ensured that Kashmiris had their indigenous rights. They had rights over their resources, which again was very nominal, but they still were the permanent residents of Kashmir. They were the citizens of Kashmir, and every other person who was a non-Kashmiri, including Indian citizens, they didn't have the same rights. Just as any other country protects its territorial sovereignty, Kashmir's territorial sovereignty had been protected under that. So after August 5th, when the autonomy was taken away, when it was struck down unilaterally without consensus, it was still like many things were already done. They were put into motion that kind of showed that how openly Kashmir is going to be raised. This idea of settler colonialism, this land grab, it was now becoming more and more powerful in people's minds. And they were actually seeing things happening. They were seeing some orders being passed where it was sort of becoming more palpable, like how they're going to parcel Kashmir, how it's going to become different zones. And that's still unfolding. And then comes the COVID pandemic. You still have a partial internet ban. People are under a partial lockdown. Then you have another lockdown because of COVID. And during that time, the government of India amends the domicile law, and it amends it in such a way that a category of people who have lived and worked and studied in Kashmir for a certain amount of time can apply for becoming the permanent residents, which means that they become domiciles of Kashmir, of this region, just like any other. Now, Kashmiris are quarantined. They can't really protest. And protest is such as criminalized already. And people are, right now, you have most of the people many of the human rights defenders, many of the people who are activists, they are imprisoned already. So there's a lot of, the ground is compromised. There's very less protest. And as this is happening, as we speak now, there are 4 journalists who have been booked under various laws for speaking out. And most of it is for compromising India's national sovereignty. And these journalists, which include Masarat Zahra, who's a woman, Kashmiri woman, she's a photojournalist, and she had uploaded something that she's already published in 2019 in, I think, in an international magazine. And she's uploading this because she's in at home, and she's trying to reshare her work on social media. So she's sharing something that she's already published. There's an FIR against her, and she's booked under the UAPA, which is a draconian law and ensures that people can go to jail from 2 to 7 years under very flimsy pretexts. And the burden of proof has to be on the person who is accused. And then there are other journalists. There is Pirzada Ashik, who is with The Hindu, and he has been accused of publishing fake news. When he has all his sources in there, and he's made sure to ascertain. Gauhar Gilani is there. There are already some journalists. Asif Sultan, he's been languishing in jails. There's Qazi. Qazi Shibli is there. So there's many. So this is happening while the pandemic is on, while people are fighting for the survival. And not only this, people aren't able to speak. They're not able to air what they are feeling. So there's a lot of, like, right now, Kashmiris are doubly suppressed. They're under this double lockdown. One is the political lockdown that's already there, a militarized lockdown. And then you have this lockdown from the pandemic. And this is required because this ensures their survival. The people are hugely compromised. Their mental health, their basic civil rights, and everything is denied to them. And this is a very, very grave situation that they're facing.
It is indeed. I mean, and as we've now, lots of us are in a sort of a partial lockdown, but we can go out of the house. There's no soldier pointing a gun. We can go into the shops. We can go and do quite a lot of things. So people mustn't confuse the sort of restrictions on basic civil liberties here and those in Kashmir being imposed by the Indian government. Now, I'd like to move on a little bit in one sense, Athar, that we've been here for so long now. You know, we've been here for over 70 years. India and Pakistan periodically go to war. And lest those of our viewers think that somehow we are pro-Pakistani, we're pro-Kashmiri, doesn't mean we're anti-Indian or anti-Pakistani, but that the question is in a way of finding a solution to this never-ending problem between India and Pakistan, on the one hand, and within these countries as well. Perhaps we could have a little reflection on your part on what has happened to us since we managed to be free of British colonialism, if you like. What are these new structures that we lumbered with of India, of Pakistan, of these South Asian entities? Is there a way we can imagine a better South Asia? And if we were to imagine that, what would it be? And then I'd like you to talk about the comparison between the struggle of indigenous peoples across the world. So if we were to imagine another South Asia, what could it be?
I think from a Kashmiri vantage and looking at the pandemic, I think it gives us an apt chance to reimagine South Asia. I think when the British left in 1947, they left these hulking behemoths of what they thought were, or the democracies that were created. And then what's happened since then is just this neoliberal plunder that's kind of getting bigger and bigger. And if you look at Kashmir as we speak today, the mining rights in Kashmir have gone to Indian companies. Mm-hmm. And the moment the moment the autonomy, the quasi-autonomy was gone, the Forest Advisory Council passed more than 100 projects that had been on the agenda for the longest time, and most of them included removing forest cover, for setting up roads, and especially to connect India with Kashmir. So, that gives you an idea of what the design is, and this had been happening since 1947 itself on Kashmir's water resources. Some of the human rights, some of the civil society leaders who are still under detention are the leaders who actually were not doing the politics. They were actually talking about water resources and returning the power projects to Kashmiris from India that are being managed by Indian national agencies. So it gives you an idea of the kind of structures that were left behind and the kind of neoliberal structures that they have become and the plunder. And we can see that in India's own heartland. We can look at Bastar, we can look at Chhattisgarh, we can look at its aflame frontiers and borders where the plunder is happening. So what I see, I don't see. I mean, democracies are not perfect; they're always in progress. There's always something that can be done and perfected. But the Indian democracy is not only illiberal, but in Kashmir, it's never been a democracy either. Because if we think about electoral politics that's been played inside Kashmir since 1947 by India, which the client politicians inside Kashmir helped India solidify. It's never been the democracy that people think democracy is. It's always been what I call in my work as politics of democracy. It's been a show of electoral politics that voting is democracy, but the basis of democracy inside Kashmir is illegal, it's illicit. And that's what so speaking from a Kashmiri vantage, when we think about a new South Asia or how we can reimagine it, I think this pandemic gives us an apt moment to rethink how we can kind of better envisage South Asia, how we can better envisage smaller countries, how we can better envisage sovereign countries that are working together. And I think the time is ripe to demilitarize the region. I think the time is ripe to decolonize the region. I think the time is ripe to let the region heal and then think about a plebiscite, which has been promised to Kashmiri people in 1947. But I also think it's not a tall order that we do not have to think only about the two options that Mountbatten left us with, India or Pakistan, but there should be an option of independence. And I think Kashmir is a very, very apt opportunity for the world to rethink how it can create safer communities for people, how it can create safer peoples rather than these stringent nations which need to have borders. And now we see how absurd all of that is, how absurd these huge behemoths of democracies are, which are not able to take care of the people that they are repressing.
Well, one of the things that certainly that captures my sort of mind in reflecting on where we could be in a new South Asia, as you know, Pakistan proved that there is no such thing as basing a nation on religion. India is trying to now create its own Hindu version of what Pakistan tried to create as a Muslim version. And one of the things that Kashmiri struggle certainly showed in the demands of the people has been that actually we don't need to fight each other. There's no basis of any form of fighting on any religious grounds, even if the repression be of a religious nature, or rather projected as a religious nature. So, in a way, I'd like you to go a little bit further, and you mentioned indigenous people and indigenous rights. Of those who may have seen the poster we used to advertise for this discussion, we had a map of Kashmir with hands coming in from different directions. Some of the hands had the Pakistani flag on, some of the hands had an Indian flag on, and on the Indian flags, there was also an Israeli flag. So, two questions arise. Why on earth did we do that? Second question, for us, we can answer it. But from a point of view of our viewers, what has happened within South Asia, and in particular in the relationship between India and Israel, that has brought these two countries to employ similar tactics as are being used against the Palestinians? What sort of tactics has India using against the Kashmiris that resonate within Palestine? And if we can, we will play a song that comes from Kashmir. But in the meantime, if you can explain what sort of tactics are being played against Kashmiri people, used against Kashmiri people, that are taken almost from the handbook of the Zionists. And we'll come on to Zionist and Hindutva in a few minutes.
So you want me to answer this and then go to the song?
Well, if you can find the song, because our assistant technical backup has disappeared, but let's if you can answer the question of what that's learned, and we'll have a go.
Well, what we have seen in the past couple of years is that the relationship between India and Israel is strengthening, and the other side of it is that it's not. There's a very strange dichotomy here that Israel already had a relationship with India. I think it was one of the first countries where an embassy or a consulate was opened, even though apparently Yasser Arafat and Indira Gandhi had a nice bonhomie with each other. He called his sister, and then there's also there was also sympathy for Palestine, and still exists in some quarters, which I find really interesting, because if you're for Palestine, then you should stand for Kashmiris too. So that's a very interesting situations for Indians to be in. Thinking about what's happened in the last few years is that there is increasing, and I say increasing just to make sure that we don't think that there was no relation prior. So what has happened is that there is more trade of arms and armaments, and there's also disciplinary kind of exchange. There's exchange of military tactics. And if you kind of see the concertina wire that's in Gaza, that's in West Bank, that you will see that the same thing happening in Kashmir. It's bound in this concertina wire. So you see the imagery between what's happening in Palestine and Kashmir is similar, and you kind of like see that the minds behind these kind of tactics, are exchanging information, they're exchanging knowledge. Then also you see the use of pellet shotguns, which has created so many blindings in Kashmir. It's the world's first case of mass blinding. So you see a level of exchange happening where military tactics, war tactics, and this has also been true in the 80s, late 80s and early 90s, that there still is active, exchange and interaction of training, military training. So most of these, they resonate with each other, and there are journalists and people, and I am with Professor Goldie Asuri. We just co-edited a journal for interventions. Identities, I think that's the journal. That's what the journal is called. It's kind of comparing Palestine and Kashmir and kind of like pulling these threads together. And what we see is that Palestine and Kashmir, they resonate with each other. I mean, they are post-colonial issues, the very first that have been on the UN agenda. So they do share those similarities. People have great sympathies with each other. Speaking from a Kashmiri vantage, there is a lot of solidarity with Kashmir. There's a lot of solidarity with Palestine, but at the same time, when we see what the two governments are doing and the manner of repression, like everything that happens in the Israeli playbook, it's almost reflected in Kashmir slowly. Very recently, we saw, how the Israelis, they do not allow the bodies of the militants to go to the families, and if they do, there are limitations on the funerals. In Kashmir, similar to Palestine, the funerals are huge gatherings. They're spontaneous gatherings, these big processions and demonstrations that people take out, even during the pandemic. So what we saw was that some of the militants that were killed, their bodies were not released to their families, and they were not even told. Now the families are actually offering DNA sampling, and so that they can be matched with the corpse, and the bodies can be returned to them. So we see these tactics. It's almost like the playbook, and it's not even a secret anymore. Earlier it was very discreet, but now this is very brazen on Israel and India.
I think that one of the things that we saw recently, Athar, was that there was a move by the Israeli embassy in India, if you remember. They were supporting the Hindutva, the relationship of Hindutva and Zionism. So, if you like, the political ideology behind the creation of the state of Israel, and now what the Indian government is pushing, the BJP led government of Hindutva. On an ideological level, what sort of points are connected between the two? And, in so far that you mentioned the repression side of not giving the bodies back of those who are resisting against Indian occupation. But you also had, they in the past, they burnt the houses down,
No, they
actually.
still do. Yeah, in fact, they did during the pandemic. They burnt a house down.
Okay. If we could, perhaps, I think we have our technical support back online again. Perhaps we could listen to a song of how people, how women in Kashmir have managed to see their position, both of, especially of the lovely Bella Chow from Kashmir. Would we be able to listen to that now, technical support? It may work. I don't know what's happening, but we'll come back to it in a few minutes. But if not, then I shall certainly have a go of trying to play it. But let's go back anyway, whilst we're waiting on that. So the ideological connections between Hindutva and Zionism for a moment. Zionism believes Israel is a place for what it calls the Jewish people. Zionism effectively maintains that the people of Palestine have to be ethnically cleansed. And that's what's been going on, a slow genocide over all this time. And the building of settlement now, we've heard talks in recent times that this very process, this idea of building settlements within in Kashmir are under the talk. Could you tell us a little bit more on that?
Well, the settlements, it's been in conversation for the longest time that the ex-servicemen, they would have a colony of their own, and that's what the autonomy protected, that the ex-servicemen, they who are in the Indian Defense Services, that they would be given an area where they could settle down. And those there was always like Kashmiri people from 1947 onwards, there have been different ways of the settler colonialism. It's not been the same that we could kind of compare with Palestine, but it doesn't mean it hasn't happened. The demographic changes have not been pushed. If the West Pakistan refugees, the what we saw recently, that many of them did not apply for the permanent residency because turned out that most of them had already got it by we don't know how. So that the case was, for the longest time, it was being peddled as one case against the autonomy, how it's being unjust to these minorities and refugees that have come in. So going back to thinking about what has been happening, if we think about the Jammu massacre, the demographic change that happened in Jammu, many young Kashmiri critical scholars are now calling that they're calling that Kashmir's Nakba. So those demographic changes have already, and then the people from 1989 onwards who have fled to Azad Kashmir because of persecution or because of joining militancy and staying there. Kaberi Robinson's book is one of the, I think, most illuminating books if you want to look at the misnomer of thinking that there is a border inside Kashmir, because there's no border inside Kashmir. There's no international border. It's an LOC, which was a ceasefire line. So these two people are not, they're legally not two different nations. They're the same nation. Mm-hmm. So going back to thinking about settler colonialism and how that manifests in Kashmir, there are several ways now. What is increasingly happening, that many people are thinking about this West Bank policy, and very recently this video became viral where the Indian Council was talking to the Kashmiri Pandit diaspora, and he was telling them that we have to follow the West Bank example or the Israel's example inside Kashmir. And there's not just talk of segregated townships for Kashmiri Pandits and for other, maybe there are free trade zones that will be set up, and there are already industrial areas that have been earmarked for certain industries. We're already looking at that kind of parceling of Kashmir. Now, Kashmiri Pandits, everyone, the resistance leaders especially, they've always supported the idea that they should come back. But it should not be, in a way, it should not be politicized. They should come back home because that's where their home is. They are the native inhabitants of the land.
Just to stop you, by Kashmiri Pandits, who do you mean? For those who don't know what Kashmiri Pandits are?
They are Kashmiris who follow the Hindu religion. Uh, they are Brahmins. All of them are from that caste. And in 1991, fearing persecution because it was a very fraught era. It was a very fraught time when people were being killed and militancy was on the rise. And they left the area, they left Kashmir, went to Jammu, the other province, and other parts of India. And it's in many the different versions of why they left and what happened. But it is a trauma for all Kashmiris. They are living in a forced exile and they have made their home elsewhere. And now India has also weaponized their pain. So these are two communities, Kashmiri Muslim community and Kashmiri Pandit community, the same stock, the same ethnicity. But they both are facing this trauma, and their pain has been weaponized by India. And India also projects Kashmir as this ancestral land of Shaivism and Hinduism and Aryanism and all of that. And in that, all of this pain and this trauma has been weaponized. And, we only have to go back to 2008 and think about the Amarnath land row. So Amarnath is one of the pilgrimages that happens annually. It has grown to lakhs. It started from a few thousand, and it used to be for 15 days, but now I think it's for 3 months. And there are many Kashmiri scholars who call it pilgrimage terrorism. And then in 2008, what happened was that they wanted to have permanent kind of structures built for the pilgrims, and for which 99, I think, land was to be given to the Amarnath shrine. Protested it because they said that this was a way of settler colonialism for the Indian influx. So that was when the Kashmiri grassroots movement kind of emerged. The intellectual movement emerged. Art, literature, it was called, from 2008, it was called the Kashmiri Intifada. There was one wave of Kashmiri Intifada. This was kind of the second wave, and I think we are on that wave at the moment, but which has changed from 2016 onwards. So there are many parallels when you see, and that was called, at that time, it was called demographic terrorism by the Kashmiris, because they saw that this would kind of spawn into a pattern where there would be these settlements that would be created, and it was called the Har Homa of Kashmir. So all of these things kind of there are resonances of what's happening. There is this thread of supremacy, the Hindu supremacy. There is this thread of ethno-nationalism, this zealotry, this bigotry, and we also see that overflowing in India at the moment. During the pandemic, the Indian Muslims have been under siege, and they call it COVID jihad. For all the preposterous purposes. And if we see from the same thread, you see Kashmir unfolding in the same manner. But I think for international audiences, it's important to point out that the problem of Kashmiri Muslims is very different from Indian Muslims.
Indeed.
The problem of Kashmiri Muslims is sovereignty. And Indian Muslims is a different thing. That's rights within their own country, within their own constitution.
Absolutely. And I remember during my own trips to Srinagar, that the houses of Pandits were not burnt down, not occupied. They're still waiting. Come back. But let me go. I think now...
There are properties that have been burnt down.
Have they? Right.
I think the period needs to be looked at very critically.
Okay.
We do not have to undermine anyone's suffering. We do not have to undermine the fact that Pandits did leave. They had to leave. Many of them were persecuted. There were killings. But we also have political scientists on record who looked at that time and who have seen that these were motivated not only by religion. They were motivated also mostly by politics, but then religion overlapped because many of the Pandits, they supported India. And at the same time, during the same time period, many Muslims were also killed and who also left the region. So this is not to negate. I mean, one death, one killing is enough. And I don't think this is the time that we can negate any community's suffering.
Absolutely. Absolutely not. We lost a bit of time, but I think we've got a video to show. You can have a little drink of water at that time as well. I know you're suffering, and if all goes well, I think we should be able to show the video that we wanted to share. and reflect on a few things as well. Indeed, I think I'm incorrect in saying there were no houses burnt. It was not in the little zone that I stayed in, certainly not in there.
Yeah,
Not
there
to say that.
there were properties that were sold as distress sales. There was a
Ab-
lot of distress. The community has, there is no denying the fact that they
yeah,
have suffered, and everyone has suffered.
absolutely, absolutely. And here we go, and let's see what happens if I press this button and see what goes on. My mic has been muted. I'm not sure, perhaps, if our technical support is able to help me with that.
So sahar aw, sahar aw, sahar aw, aw, aw, gul yel fallen, jabir yel salan, shahid bachan karon Kashmir azad. So pad matil, kunant poshpor, Çınlamış mitsanen zenen mesçi yad yad yad yim tayram naybuk Vapas na aynbuk Subhan shaman divan dimman aysinad Sein pol min golab Zunt aftab Kabran mas traybuk Vannu kimçi namolum afrat aysnu yilmanan Har doçu vatan Alam hetçi bakan köşü şahsavar Düşman maz pelet Sinan maz bulet Harden maz kir Gesiş kutsa krak krak krak İzraili taki Çutu yazmaman Esti hoşmut Falastini intifad Ali Singh Tumli Abdullah Tandi Tandi Astim Muftiyan Hind Khab Khab Khab Dünya Hasovu Sasi Pornovu Asti Dohay Prazno Tuhun Apzar Puns me Agast Padraun Onui Tunzi Jamhuriyat Ukras Go Fash Fash Fash Amriki Vanan London Tivanan UNS Mazduzne Tuhuz Nazichar Parmani Koru Sahi accession Sheetik election UN resolution Fraud fraud fraud to the article To the agreement Nabrutsu temiz nabrutsu I say az Tuiteo do hope Chuesi harchir Suju emsit gaisi koshuna Kam kam kampanyo balzonish Tohin sen rayu Estilyok chicken maz inkalab Dorago kunui Garishne khabri Zamini asne soin Ukti tulani azab Ashik tu mashuk Kai huk kai jada Hera naire dilar mashuk istirab Asfatu pota Be onu tada PSAN kurta lakchar kar bar bar bar makan soin salyu Garu bujroyu Tote bagan hurchut kara ehtijaj Waqt chugawa Tariq nauka Tezis mujadok muhim ye pakan ye rawan tezis se bang Zuito bujanan Astulan kaini shuri mart zanan Yeli azadi Sani Kashire Yizyo kabren perte dizyo aise nar nar nar Vanzo shahido Muhim bas manzil Tu shahadat Jam.
Ooh, that just sends goose pimples down my back, really, just listening to. And on that note, perhaps we move to the final stage of the last 10 minutes. It really shows that so long as people resist, no matter how powerful the powerful may be, they can't get rid of the desire for freedom, the desire for justice, and the desire for the resolution of the pain that we're all suffering. Even those who put down people themselves are suffering. Perhaps now I'm a little bit emotional after listening to that. But perhaps we could talk about your book and in the next 10 minutes end with one of your poems, which we've recorded and uploaded. And hopefully, there we go. The book has come up. Could you tell us a little bit about the how you set about writing the book and what you found in your journeys of your research?
Thank you so much for asking this question. You know, Kashmiri women, especially Kashmiri Muslim women, have been portrayed as these oppressed masses who are within this patriarchal, conservative setup where you have a Muslim man as the demon who is kind of oppressing them and not letting them speak. So that's one part of it, because I am a Kashmiri Muslim woman who has been constantly, like, before in my young days, as I was kind of trying to figure out what to do, I was a journalist. I was constantly asked this question, like, where's your veil? Why don't you cover your head? Not that I didn't cover my head. I did cover my head for a certain period of time, but it's part of your own choice. It's part of who you are. So I hadn't, and also, like, how are you able to speak English? How are you able to, like, the questions that are routine questions that many Muslim women get, like, how are you a human being? Why don't you have a man who is operating you? And I hadn't seen that kind of Kashmir. Not that we are not conservative, not that we are not patriarchal, but we also have to understand that Kashmiris for the last 500 years were indentured peasants and slaves, de facto slaves. And when I saw the Kashmiri patriarchy, it was mostly working class. That's what I call it, where you had a woman who was the husband was baking the bread and the woman was selling it. The husband was catching the fish, the woman was selling the fish. So there was this complementary and supplementary economy happening where both men and women were working. There were elite classes which were covering their women, and that's kind of the standard in most Muslim societies, that there are working class patriarchies, and of course social patriarchies existed in the same manner, where women did have those social decorums and things thrusted upon them, where there were do's and don'ts, which are very stereotypical of all traditional societies. But then there was also this certain autonomy that many Kashmiri women had, especially in the social sphere. And I think many feminist scholars from Middle East have also spoken about that. So I saw those resonances. So because our problem was that Kashmiri men were being doubly demonized, and sometimes Indian politicians and sometimes Indian feminists, they would come to save Kashmiri women from their men. And then as I was growing up, I was seeing these women for the longest time sitting in a park every month, and having a funeral, and they were mourning. And as I became a journalist, I became close to them, and as a little sort of like, doing my little activism, I became close to the Association of Parents of Disappeared Persons. And these were women who had gotten together under the leadership of Parveena Ahangar, who is a co-founder of the movement. And the other co-founder is Parvez Imroz, who's a human rights lawyer. And this was founded in 1994 when the boys started disappearing from the late 80s. They would either be taken into custody or they would just leave in the morning and not return in the evening. And that's how we got more than 10,000 forcibly disappeared people. And many of them have been taken into custody by the Indian army. And those cases are being fought and languishing in Indian jail, Indian courts. So to me, this was activism. This wasn't just mourning. This was politics of mourning. Now, thinking about the Kashmiri scenario, you have Armed Forces Special Powers Act, where you can't get together and have a congregation of people sitting in a public plaza demonstrating or protesting. So what these women were actually doing were that they were using the tools that were available to them, the tools, the traditional tools of mourning that they were deploying as politics to protest this big injustice. And that's what they have been doing for the last 33 years. And that they have a female consciousness, that their family is gone, that their sons are gone, that they want that system back, they want their security back. But at the same time, it kind of is also opening feminist consciousness, where they are looking towards, they're not just mothers, accidental activists, they're there by choice now. Parveena Ahangar goes on to represent the Kashmiris. She goes on to represent her struggle, but she talks about the larger injustice. She talks about the larger political struggle. She talks about the will of people. So the female consciousness, slowly the accidental activism, it kind of opened the door to this larger feminist consciousness. And now you see a movement. Today, if you think about human rights movement in Kashmir, you think about resistance in Kashmir, they're the first ones that come to the mind. And Parveena Ahangar is kind of known as the Iron Lady of Kashmir, because unflagging spirit since the last 33 years, looking for these boys, not just for her own son. And that kind of essence, that has become the essence of every woman, most of the women. Now, that's not to glorify their struggle. Most of them are marginalized. Most of them are of a family that need financial help, and main breadwinner is gone when this person disappears. He's left a wife behind. He's left kid behind. The wife, in Kashmiri media, they coined the term half widow for her, because whether the man is alive or dead. So there's lots of destitution, but the struggle is unflagging. So I kind of like see this as affective law, that the law is not, there's no formal law that there's the sovereign's law, there's the Indian law that refuses to see this struggle as just. There's this Indian law that even refuses to see these disappearances. They call them missing people.
That's right. That's right.
Across the border, they call the LOC the border, which is not the border. And, they might be in Pakistan. Again, it's a misnomer, not in Pakistan per se, but people, when they cross LOC, they don't enter Pakistan, they enter Azad Kashmir. And that's one of the vague things that's kind of put on the region to make the two regions seem as if there are equal things happening. And so that's a different story. But this is the story of these women, and the book is about their struggle for justice and also for political resolution. And this book kind of like tries to show that they're not just bodies that can be moved in a certain direction, they're minds, and they have a certain will. And then it also talks about, through that vantage, it also brings in the Kashmiri men and shows how they are a patriarchy, a working class patriarchy majorly, but at the same time, how compromised and feminized they are as well in this situation of militarized occupation.
Thank you very much for that. I'm sorry we lost a little bit of time at the beginning. So we've come to the end of our time, and we'll go back over it, because there's a few of my questions haven't been come. And at one point, and then we can end on your poem. When there was talk earlier on, around about October, November, I think it was, somebody talking about civil disobedience in Kashmir. You came out with a phrase, if I remember. What was it? That there's no question, civil disobedience. Was it? What did you say? Do you remember?
I think I said there's no civil disobedience because there is resistance. Because there's.
I think you said there's no civil obedience because it implies there's no obedience in Kashmir, and I think that's what you said. And the reason I raise it in a way is that the resistance, where if you're going to resist, you're not going to be obedient. And that leads us into your poem, and hopefully technology will not let us down. And to our viewers, please forgive us for a few technological glitches that we had. We've no idea what happened. The internet was on, but we were disconnected. But I hope that you have been enlightened by Athar's words and inspired by the struggle of the people of Kashmir, and know that there is no solution but a just solution for the people of Kashmir. And it really isn't, like Athar said, we have to move beyond the same old stuff of either India or Pakistan. Kashmiris deserve the right of self determination, which means independence. And now, Athar, if, as we say farewell, perhaps we can watch together your poem and listen to it. And I hope you are all inspired as much as I've been.
I will cross. My love, I'm at the line of control, inching. Tonight, the moon is graying, the darkness perfecting itself, or so I hope. The breeze is weakening like the old tyrant's hand. I will cross. My love, senses are crammed, bright, blinding searchlights again. I might as well be visible from space. Barbed wires, drones, electric fences, empty bottles of liquor. I taste blood, guns, lights, smoke, coughing, cursing, soldiers, dogs. And I see the dark beauty of our moonlit meadows. Your perfume on the other side is a paradise. I will cross. My love, waiting to hold you has been such a joy. How many lines will I have to cross, or infiltrate, as they say? I mind no more. I will cross. My love, I fear this year's snow will again be sparse. Our thirst will only grow. I should not wait. I'm a lover who is labeled a terrorist anyway. I will cross. My love, I will always be in love with your wadiyan, your wildflowers, your wilderness, and winds that say my name, and your waterfalls wading in growing puddles of blood. I will cross, I will cross, I will cross.
Thank you very much for watching us. And what with me was Atarzia and her moving poem as a conclusion of our discussion. I will cross, and inshallah, one day the wire will go, the border will go, the ceasefire line, so called, will not be there, and the peoples of South Asia will be able to breathe in a new world, a just world where the bigots that rule us will be no more, and all these obscurantanical ideologies will be a thing of the past, and we will be guided in a much more just world. So let's hope that the people we can resolve these conflicts. And thank you so much for being patient and talking to us through all our technical glitches. Until next time, thank you for watching us, and thank you, Athar, once again.
Thank you, Tariq. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.